my world. Don't worry, darling, I just smile, 'cause you're by my side. And now your eyes open up every morning to the love that shines in mine, and I see it in yours too. So now I sing to you, and when you go, leave me here all alone. I'll be waiting, we can make it, because I know.
What's going on? It's the Big Rig Bull, Texas truck accident lawyer Reshard Alexander. Today we're going to talk about alcohol and controlled substances testing for commercial truck drivers. So sit back, relax, and strap on your seatbelt. I'm eating these, man. Can you believe this? Crunchy, dried beets. I actually like beets, so I'm not, kind of thrown off by this, but I haven't eaten all day, man. That's not good, It's not really good at all. So day 2 of me, preparing to move into this office, I thought I was going to be able to get my keys today to move in, and I could have just stayed over here, tonight and just hauled everything down there, for the most part. But I'm not going to be able to get the keys until probably Friday, which means I won't be able to move anything in really because the carpet has to be cleaned and whatnot. But I already have an idea of how everything is going to be stationed in the office, so I'm really excited about it. Beets are really crunchy. But one reason that I wanted to talk about alcohol and controlled substance testing today is because I read an article that said one of the main issues for motor carriers is drug usage by their truck employees. And the more I start to read into the statutes and stuff, you see that they test for alcohol and controlled substances. And although they do test for alcohol, it seems like the controlled substances statute or regulations are a bit more hardy or strict. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word. I'm a writer. I like to think about what I'm going to say before I say it. I've been flipping through this magazine, Truck Club, or I thought it was called El Troquero. I've been flipping through this the past day. I picked this up at the truckers show, and it's amazing that trucks really kind of aren't that expensive. Well, I guess they can be, but you can get a truck for like $30,000, a decent one. I don't know how long it'll last. But they can be expensive. I see trucks in here too that are like $100,000, $161,000. But that's like the top of the line 2019 Kenworth T370. I suppose some of these Cascadia trucks, these Freightliners, can be pretty expensive too. So the funny thing about moving into that new office is that I need furniture and stuff, I don't really need that much furniture because I already have, like I said before, a standing desk at home for that back office. But I ran to a place and was able to find a desk and what do you call it, a credenza maybe, cabinets and all that for free basically. But now I have to go pick all of it up, and that's what's really going to bother me because I've been moving around the United States so much for a huge portion of my adult life that I've just really gotten tired of picking stuff up and moving it and taking it here and taking it there. But I just don't. A lot of times it's not that I'm cheap and I don't want to hire somebody to move stuff, but it's just it feels like a bigger hassle to have someone do the stuff for you than just to go ahead and trudge ahead and do it yourself. And that's what I'm learning now as an attorney, that I got to learn how to just delegate things away, because I've spent so much of my life just being like a one-man army on almost everything that I do, feeling like, hey, I can't give this to someone else because they're not going to do as good of a job on it as me. But at the end of the day, when you realize and you know what you're trying to build, you know that you cannot do it alone. you know that you're going to need other people supporting you. You know, being a first generation lawyer, uh, being a first generation college graduate has really taught me a lot about just the world in general, and how, you know, we all come from different backgrounds. And I feel personally that a lot of times when you don't come from privilege and you make it into a profession like this, you know, you kind of are a fish out of water in a way. But it's to your benefit, because you have not necessarily grown up viewing everything in black and white the way that other people do. Because when you've seen, you know, different aspects of the world, it kind of makes you look at the world with a not you know, like a learned view or anything like that, but just you realize that the world is gray. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are here talking about 49 CFR 382. That is the main statute, federal statute that deals with alcohol and controlled substance testing. So this today is the presentation of alcohol and controlled substance testing, part 1, okay, as it relates to trucking law. What you need to understand that, number one, is when you're talking about preemption or federal law will invalidate any state law for the most part that conflicts with it. So if there's a state law in your state that will conflict with whatever these federal laws are, the federal law is going to overrule that. Okay. So number one, we're going to talk about the alcohol usage on duty. Okay. A driver cannot use alcohol within 4 hours of going on duty or being in control of or operating the vehicle. This seems pretty easy to understand. I mean, you cannot drink alcohol, consume alcohol 4 hours before you go on duty. It seems like it should be longer than that, but that's the law. That's what it is. Number two, if there's any conduct or appearance by the driver within that 4 hour period, that's a no-go on the motor carrier's behalf, on their side. They cannot allow you to operate a commercial motor vehicle if there's something about your conduct or appearance that gives off the impression that you are under the influence of alcohol. Now, generally speaking, how do they view that? Well, they're going to judge you by your appearance. They're going to judge you by your behavior. They're going to judge you by your body odor. They're going to judge you by your speech. Okay? If there is a suspicion that you are under the influence of alcohol at that time, then what they're going to do is within 2 hours of the safety director or the supervisor or whoever has pointed you out, you have to take a test within 2 hours of them identifying you as someone who they believe is under the influence of alcohol. Now, if they don't test you within 2 hours, they have up till 8 hours. Now, when 8 hours comes along, they cannot perform the test. Okay? So if they cannot perform the test, then that puts you and the motor carrier, if you're a trucker, it puts you and the motor carrier in a bad situation, because now you're placed out of service, or the driver's placed out of service, until either their blood alcohol concentration is at is less than 0.02 or a 24-hour waiting period. So that's where you are on that. The supervisor that has to that will review you, or that's going to identify you, they have to have somebody. That motor carrier has to have someone on their staff who has 1 hour of alcohol misuse training, 1 hour of controlled substance misuse training as well. So that's that as far as the appearance, behavior, body odor. How are they going to determine whether or not you've been under the influence or are under the influence of alcohol? Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is the safety sensitive function, which is you can find the definition of that under statute 382 107. And basically what it is it's all time from the time a driver begins work or is required to be in readiness to work until the time he or she is relieved from work, and all responsibility for performing work. That is what is categorized or defined, as a safety sensitive function. So there are a number of things that are listed in the statute that tell you what is specifically a safety sensitive function. But for layman's terms, you could pretty much say almost anything that you're going to do on the job outside of being in that sleeper berth is going to be probably categorized as a safety safety sensitive function. But I'll go ahead and give you the 6 that I wrote out. Number 1 is if you're waiting for dispatch, if you're just waiting for them to call you up, anytime you're in any type of readiness period or waiting to do something, but you're still on duty, that is going to be considered a safety sensitive function. All time that you spend inspecting the equipment, that's going to be a safety sensitive function. The third thing is time spent at the driving controls of the commercial motor vehicle. Like I said before, obviously, everything else, the only thing that's pretty much excluded is the sleeping in the sleeper berth. But number 3 is time spent at the driving controls. Number 4 is all time, like I said, excluding berth time. Number 5 is if you're loading, unloading a load, if you are assisting with unloading a load, any of that is considered safety sensitive function. And the last thing is if you are repairing the commercial motor vehicle, if you are assisting with repairing it, if you are waiting for assistance, if you're in attendance of someone repairing it, that is considered a safety sensitive function. Okay? When it comes to the alcohol concentration, when you're dealing with this statute, if you have an alcohol concentration in your blood of 0.02 to 0.04, that means that you cannot drive for 24 hours after the alcohol test, and you cannot perform a safety sensitive function. Okay? The next thing we want to talk about is controlled substances on duty. Now, if you notice, this is when you're talking about this particular statute, you're talking about alcohol, and then you're talking about controlled substances. Okay? So there's alcohol, and then there's other drugs for the most part, and they have different tests to a certain extent. So the second thing is controlled substances on duty. This is only allowable pursuant to the instructions of a physician who has advised the driver that this will not affect his or her ability to operate a commercial motor vehicle. So obviously you can't drink when you're on duty, but you can use some controlled substances if the physician has told you that it's not going to impair your ability to operate a commercial motor vehicle. If the truck driver tests positive for a controlled substance, they cannot report for duty, they cannot remain on duty, and they cannot perform a safety sensitive function. So let me say that one more time. If a truck driver tests positive for a controlled substance, they cannot remain on duty, they cannot report to duty, and they cannot perform a safety sensitive function. All right? The next thing we want to move on to is the pre-employment drug screening and testing. The motor carrier must provide you with educational materials prior to your alcohol controlled substance screening. They have to give you the information so you know what you're dealing with before then. Okay? Now, the drug testing by the motor carrier must occur before the trucker's first safety sensitive function. And it needs to be, and your alcohol test needs to be less than 0.04. And you need to have a negative controlled substance test. I mean, that seems to be common sense. I mean, for the most part, they need to drug test you before you obviously get out on the road. But if they didn't do this, then they have to obtain your trucker's records from the prior testing program. So if you were employed by someone else, they have to go get those records from them before they can put you on the road. Now, like I said before, if there's no pre-employment alcohol test, it's not necessarily needed all the time if in the last 6 months you were tested and you had an alcohol test that was below 0.04 and the driver record has no prior violations within the last 6 months. So I hope you got that. Let me say that again just to make sure you got it. If they didn't do a pre-employment alcohol test on you, it's not necessarily needed if in the last 6 months you had a test, an alcohol test that was below 0.04 and your driver record has no prior violations within the last 6 months. Okay? For the pre-employment controlled substance test, it's not needed if there was a test for controlled substances within the last 6 months, or there was a random drug testing in the last 12 months, and the motor carrier contacted the driver's prior employer to ensure no past controlled substance violations in prior 6 months. Okay? So, really, if you were tested in the last 6 months, then you should be good. It's the random drug testing within the last 12 months and then having to contact the prior employer, which kind of throws you off a bit. But one thing you notice, like I said before, is that controlled substances are tested more heavily, or it's a lot more to go through than just dealing with the alcohol portion of it. A few other things I wanted to talk about before I get out of here. Okay, so a driver that is not employed by a motor carrier, but they're used more than once a year, they have to obtain alcohol and controlled substance testing every 6 months, or the test must be done by the motor carrier themselves. So, they might as well go ahead and employ the person, but if they don't, then you're going to have to get testing every 6 months for the most part. A motor carrier has to document the file when they can't obtain the alcohol and controlled substance testing records for a driver. Okay? And they have to use good faith to actually try to get those records. They can't just say, oh yeah, we tried to get them and they didn't look for them. The other thing is the motor carrier must request all tests where the tests were greater than 0.04 and positive controlled substance records. Now, I read one book that said within a 2-year period, but when I went and looked at the statute, I think it said 3 years. I think they have to go back 3 years to request all positive testing above 0.04 and the positive controlled substance test. But I'll have to go back and look at that, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 years, not 2. The motor carrier must review the alcohol controlled substance records no later than 14 days after the driver performs the first SSF, or the safety sensitive function. And the last thing is the motor carrier cannot employ a driver until, if they have violated somehow, they can't employ them until the driver has completed the rehab requirements and whatnot. And so that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to cover tonight. This has been a really long day, so I'm sorry if this one wasn't as clear as I usually am, but I'll try to come back at it with more energy tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and see you later.
She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something about her features. You'll find her beauty goes much deeper once you get to meet her. You see her walking down the boulevard. She got the posture of a superstar. She looks so fly in those Gucci slides. yeah, I wonder what she hides under her disguise. Yeah. And all the girls around the world, they wanna be her. And all the dudes are trying to score like it's fever. She lives a double life, puts on a show. What's under the subtle smile, we'll never know. She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something about her features. You'll find her beauty goes much deeper once you get to meet her. She's a Mona Lisa.